All right. So I'll be talking about challenges and opportunities for persons with disabilities in Nigeria. And from WHO key facts, an estimated 1.3 billion people experience significant disabilities. 80% of these are from low to middle income, in other words, developing countries such as Nigeria. I must mention that Nigeria is one of the most densely populated countries in Africa. We have over 200 million people. That's as of 2022. And statistics show that 25 million people in Nigeria are living with one form of disability or another. We can see the map of Nigeria within Africa. Nigeria has 32 states with a federal capital territory. In fact, Nigeria can be divided into two cultural zones. The northern zone, there are more Muslims, and then the southern zone, more of Christians. And the forms of disability that have been identified, I think Sabrina mentioned about 6, but then I have 5 here: visual impairment, hearing, physical, intellectual, and communication. And the causes of disability from research that have been done in Nigeria, they range from the prevalence of disability in Nigeria. They are attributed to congenital malformation, inherited disabilities, birth-related incidents, psychological dysfunction, poverty and malnutrition. Poor access to healthcare, due to poverty, untreated preventable diseases, physical injuries due to frequent traffic accidents, outbreaks of infectious diseases, drug misuse, unchecked chronic illnesses, and results of conflict. In Nigeria, we are experiencing the Boko Haram insurgency, and it's especially in the northeast region in Nigeria. So they have the highest number of people with disability in the country. Now, the Nigerian government, in our 1999 constitution, it confers definite rights fundamental to existence of all citizens, which of course includes people with disabilities, persons with disabilities. They are inalienable rights and cannot be deprived. And these rights, for example, the rights of freedom from discrimination, which is in section 42, 2 of the Constitution, it stipulates that no citizen of Nigeria shall be subjected to any disability or deprivation merely by reason of the circumstances of his birth. And this indirectly addresses the issue of persons with disabilities, providing for the rights of equal and fundamental rights for all of them. And the persons of disability on the federal government passed on, I'm sorry, just a minute, okay. In a minute. Uh-oh. Yeah, I'll continue, all right. The persons with disability law of 30th March 2007, and its optional protocol. So they were adopted. It was adopted, and on January 23rd, 2019, the Nigerian president signed into law the Discrimination Against Persons with Disability Prohibitions Law. And this law enshrines recommendations of the Convention of Rights of Persons and Disabilities, awarding penal damages to victims of discrimination against people living with disabilities. And according to Section 1 of the law, anybody that is found guilty discriminating against a person with disability is liable to pay 100,000 Nigerian naira. And if that's for an individual, and if it is an institution, 1 million naira, or a term of 6 months, or both, jail term and the fine. Now, the law prohibits discrimination against persons with disability and sanctions those who contravene this fine. Furthermore, as at 2019, January 23rd, 2019, a 5-year provisional period was stipulated for the modification of amenities, particularly in public buildings, and fixing assistive tools in vehicles to make them accessible and usable for persons with disabilities. Meaning that in a month's time, 2024, the 5-year period will elapse. Along with this, in line with the Prohibitions Act of 2018 bill, the Nigerian president in 2018 also approved the establishment of the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities. This commission is to prevent discrimination against persons with disabilities and to make every one of them have equal rights and opportunities like counterparts with no disabilities. Also, since Nigeria ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2017 and its optional protocol in 2010, we must mention that NGOs, civil society groups, and persons with disabilities, they've called on government to put it in practice. And the Discrimination Against Persons with Disability Prohibition Act is known to have actually been the effort of relentless advocacy by disability rights groups and their activists. And Nigeria has numerous NGOs that are in support of persons with disability in the country. I must mention that some of these NGOs were a result of their founders living with disabilities in their household. And as a result of that, they set up NGOs in support of persons with disabilities. For example, the Center for Citizens with Disabilities is described as one of the foremost human rights organizations in Nigeria. And for persons with disabilities, they work to promote inclusion, participation, access, and mainstreaming of issues of critical concerns of citizens with disabilities in programs and activities of state and non-state institutions. Also, it works to educate, to support and empower persons with disabilities and their families to maximize their potentials. It was established in year 2002. Apart from that, there are other, I think at least 10 other NGOs mentioned, and some of them are listed here. Like I mentioned earlier, many of these NGOs were set up because the founders had need, and they had children, relatives that were persons with disabilities, and as such, they set up these NGOs. Like you can see this cerebral palsy, especially the founder's child suffers from cerebral palsy, and also Down Syndrome Foundation. On and on, we have the Home for Blind, the Deaf Women Allowed Initiative, Disability Rights Advocacy Center. Others include, we have Sight Savers, the Lotus Initiative for the Blind, and also another cerebral palsy initiative, among several NGOs that have been set up to support persons with disabilities. But then, in spite of Nigerian government's positive approach by committing to key international and domestic instruments, which we mentioned earlier, towards persons with disabilities, and the NGOs, their support for persons with disabilities, a number of them still suffer significant level of discrimination and are often prevented from participating in their communities in Nigeria. Many of them face a number of human rights abuses such as stigma, discrimination, violence, and lack of access to healthcare, housing, and education. Many disabled citizens are known to live in relative poverty and are often hampered in their access to public services and opportunities. Also, they face several challenges, which include negative treatment and attitude from some members of the society. So despite the new law of 2019, many Nigerians living with disabilities, they experience discrimination. And we must mention that Nigeria is a country of immense ethnic, cultural, linguistic, and religious diversities. We have ethnic groups between 374 and 610. And each of these ethnic groups, they have their own indigenous forms of religious beliefs before Christianity and Islam were introduced. Now, many Nigerians can be described as devout Christians or Muslims. However, For many of them, their traditional belief systems, they still shape their understanding of disability. And disability is usually seen as a spiritual sickness or curse. And if we look at the traditional aspect of it, causes of disabilities in Nigeria are attributed to a number of factors. We listed out at the beginning causes of disabilities. But now, from the traditional sphere, it includes ancestral violation of societal norms, offenses against deities of the land, breaking laws, family sins, misfortune, witches and wizards, and adultery. And in regards to this, I have a quotation from Dorma 2020. And she said, some cultures are still repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience. They see disabilities as evil, carriers of evil, bad luck, ill luck, misfortune, death, and cause bearers and carriers. In some Nigerian culture, if a child is born deformed, such a child secretly, though, is thrown into the evil forest, and the deities are appeased for cleansing of that family. Those that survive the ordeal are always isolated, marginalized, and not allowed to participate fully in the society. They are not allowed by such communities to mingle and enjoy the same rights and privileges with others in the community, and are forbidden from participation in cultural activities. That's Doma 2020, page 14. You would expect that this probably was in the last century, but this, like we have found out, is even still in this 21st century. Also, too, according to some mythologies, some of the local mythologies, individuals with disabilities are societal outcasts, seeking revenge for transgressions of their ancestors. Also, a common misconception is that individuals with disabilities are not only less valuable than people with impairment, but they may also be used for social and commercial gain. Unfortunately, that is, they can be sacrificed to bring money and good fortune. The grassroots, there's an NGO, the grassroots NGO, the research-based NGO in Nigeria, they surveyed the needs and challenges faced by the persons with disabilities. They focused especially in the Northeast region, where we have the Boko Haram conflict. And majority of the people interviewed said they were negatively treated by some members of the society, ill-treated and referred to as beggars. Also, it has been observed that in most parts of Nigeria, Benin City, where I live, even in Lagos, the Federal Capital Territory, persons with disabilities, especially children, who ought to be in school are in the streets begging for alms. This is a major problem that has contributed to the wrong behaviors manifested by persons with disabilities, which result to the ways the society view them as people who need to beg for alms to survive. It was observed that in the populations of beggars and street beggars, persons with disabilities, they ranked first. And it has also been found out that out of many of the street beggars, they came out to beg due to neglect. So focusing on this issue of religion and culture, it's simple for parents of disabled children to send them out to beg in the streets because, it's seen that the parents have authority over the children. There's this cultural emphasis that we should respect parents because of the authority they have on their children. The idea that the sight of such children, people send their children out to arouse pity. And as such, when you see these disabled children, you have to give them something. Okay, when parents or guardians of disabled children send their children out to beg for alms, they compare their action to those of parents and guardians who send their children out to be street vendors, because we still have children in the streets who hawk, although it is against the law. But then children from poor homes who cannot even afford to go to school, they still go on the streets to hawk and sell things. So when some of these disabled children, they refuse to beg, they are threatened by physical harm, and also too, they are threatened by their parents, and denied food. Okay, and in some instances, harsher punishment. They can tell them, they will send them out of the house. So generally speaking, it's assumed that many of these children with impairment, they obey their parents out of concern for they do not want that to be punished. And you see, they send these children out because of poverty. And using disabled children as a means of requesting charity has its cultural and religious connotation. Like the ancient Almajiri system. It's a long-standing Hausa Fulani tradition and cultural practice. It illustrates the religious and cultural aspects of alms begging, using children with or without disability to solicit alms. This Almajiri system, it's a semi-formal, non-secular education in which children between the ages of 4 and 18 are assigned to learn. And it's a component of the Islamic education system in northern Nigeria that was developed to assist youngsters without homes. So as part of it, you see disabled children also in the streets begging. So it's noted that a great deal of Nigerians are influenced by their culture and religion to participate in extremely discriminatory activities against persons with disabilities. Other needs and challenges of persons with disability, they include, apart from the cultural belief, also they use the Bible as well as the Quran to claim that these conditions, I think my time is up, to claim these conditions as a result from a cause from God. These people are isolated. And I must remark that the World Bank Disability Inclusion in Assessment of Nigeria, they revealed that persons with disability in Nigeria, they lack access to basic services. And that attitudinal barrier represents a major impediment to their social economic inclusion. Also, that the inclusive policy has been described as non-existent, weak, and inadequately implemented. However, also too, in the law court, you find out that it's difficult for the disabled person to get justice. But how can we do concerning the opportunities? So despite their circumstances, there are some certain opportunities that we can highlight. These opportunities include using cultural and we can still use cultural and religious beliefs. For example, these beliefs, we can use anthropological methods in collaboration with the local communities, religious authorities, and traditional healers to deconstruct these damaging notions. So it is possible to incorporate cultural sensitivity training into the school curricula, which can help children develop an inclusive mindset from early age. Also, to the decision makers, legislators, also they must recognize disability as a developmental issue. Advocacy is necessary. In advocacy, we can also employ the use of our religious leaders, and also to encourage the persons with disabilities themselves to pursue productive endeavors. And also, we should portray positive, there should be positive portrayals of persons with disabilities in advertisements, TV series, movies, and this can dispel prejudices and promote acceptances. Also, too, this persons with Discrimination Against Persons with Disability Act of 2018 must be put in effect. It should be put in effect in so many ways. And with alliances with local authorities in the religious and community sphere to guarantee that disability laws are easily incorporated into the regional tradition. Also, programs and policy effectiveness can be regularly evaluated to ensure well-informed modifications and advancement. Of importance, I must mention that well-informed policy making, there should be, for well-informed policy making, the depth of data on prevalence of disability, it should be addressed. Through comprehension of regional context, cultural oddities, and practices pertaining to disabilities, anthropological research can make a valuable contribution. As we have seen in the 2018 Nigerian Demographic and Health Survey, it incorporated disability modules into surveys, and it was a positive move. So in order to ensure a nuanced and culturally sensitive approach, tailored interventions based on regional anthropological insights are required. Also,
give us some time for discussion,
okay,
please.
I will be, pardon? I'm sure my time is up. So we should also, like I mentioned, there should be employment initiative for persons with disability, also empowering them, empowering organizations that support them. In conclusion, in order to address the issues that Nigerians with disabilities face, a comprehensive strategy that takes into account cultural and religious beliefs is needed, because inclusive policies and initiatives can be implemented with the guidance of anthropological insight. Nigeria can advance in its transition to a more inclusive and equitable society through raising awareness, fortifying legal frameworks, gathering pertinent data, and empowering organizations that serve people with persons with disabilities. It is impossible for national and subnational governments to accomplish its ambitious goal of poverty alleviation and economic growth without actively integrating people with disabilities into their developmental agenda. So that brings me to an end. Thank you very much for listening.